What's up, guys, and welcome back to another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge. So today, we are honored and blessed. Not only are we going to find somebody that has broken a Guinness Book of World Records, she's got her new book coming out. She's a mom of 7. She recovered from almost a fatal car accident and has an incredible story. So you're going to want to tune into this because probably in your life, you've faced some adversity. Maybe you've wanted to write a book. Maybe you've wanted to conquer a challenge in your life and you were not sure how. So Jenn Drummond, not only does she have her own podcast, but guys, I'm pointing to this book because you need to pre-order it now. Make sure you listen to today's story because not only is it going to inspire you, but I believe God has called you to do something in your life. There's a challenge awaiting you. We're going to help you unlock that today and figure out within Jenn's story and what she's done, how can you find your competitive edge and get into the game. So Jenn, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me here today.
I'm excited. So we just kind of crossed back and forth. We were talking about I was in Park City a little over a month and a half ago, and then now you're in Nashville.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. So tell me about, I got to ask Park City, people that actually live there, because those of us that visit, I got to start there. Do you love it?
Oh, it's so good. And it's crazy because they told me people come in the winter and they're like, okay, I'm going to come. And then in the summer, they're like, okay, we're moving. And you think of Park City as a winter sports area, but the summer has so much amazing things to do too. So if you love the outdoors, it's an adult playground.
Yeah, and I saw you grew up, you did some gymnastics,
Yep.
You've done triathlons, you've done all of these things where I'm like, hold on, you've built out a life to where you were skiing early on, and so I can imagine going to Park City. It's like, okay, I have all these things. And your point, we went in the end of October.
Okay.
Never been.
Yeah.
Beautiful that time of year.
Beautiful.
We always go ski season.
Yes.
And so for those listening out there, I want you to go to Park City, go check it out. We had such a blast. So I'm jealous. I'll just tell you that because as we went through it, I was like, now I see why people will live there full time.
Well, and it's nice because you're 35 minutes from an international airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about Sundance, you got some other little areas you can kind of get over to and have some fun.
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump into this because you've got your book coming out. And I love the fact that you're doing this. And this is a genesis that will go through your story. But tell me a little bit about why did you decide to write the book and why now?
Oh, I wish I didn't write the book some days. Okay. Anybody who's written a book, they can understand the pain. When I was halfway through my adventure, I went out to lunch with a friend of mine and he was listening to my stories and he's like, these are riveting. He goes, you need to write a book. As in, do you want brownies or cookies with our dessert today? And so I'm like, okay, sure. I'll write a book, having no idea what kind of undertaking it is. But it was a project that I felt called to do because the experiences that I had on the mountain are experiences that we have in everyday life. And sometimes when we see things in the extreme, it's easier for us to resonate and be like, oh, actually, I can use this and get through this thing.
Yeah, I love that. So let's jump right into that because I think people that know you and they look at any of your story right away, you see first female to ever go through the 7-second summits and what you went through. I'm looking at all these different ones and knowing a little bit about how dangerous it is and what you had to overcome and really no history or anything there. I'd love for you to tell the story about one, like why in the world would you even take this on, right? You're successful. You have 7 kids. You have this great life you're living. You could have done a lot of things. And you decided to conquer these mountains that are, one of them I looked at, like 40-something% fatality rate or 24% fatality rate. I mean, I'm looking at this going, this is a lot scarier than I even knew. So why in the world? Why did you do it?
Yeah. I think we get that itch that we're meant for more, or there should be more, or there's something that is on the other side that we're curious about. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I got into a horrific car crash in 2018. It should have taken my life and didn't. I'm metabolizing that experience at the same time a girlfriend of mine goes running on a trail that you and I could push a stroller on. It's wet out. She slips, hits her head, and never comes home.
Wow.
And so the significance of those two events so close to each other made me realize I don't get to choose when I die. But I sure get to choose how I live. And am I really living? Right? Was I really living? And I wasn't. I was going through the motions. I was checking the boxes. I was just doing the thing. And I realized, man, if this is my last decade or year or month or week, am I living? And I couldn't answer that. So 2019 became this big year of the bucket list. Who's Jenn? What do I want to do? What do I want to experience in life? And on that list was climb a mountain. And I was turning 40 in 2020. So I'm like, what am I going to do to launch this birthday in this next decade of life? And on my list of all these things, climb a mountain stood out because I'm like, I'm only getting older. This is going to be easier the younger that I am. And so I live in Park City. There's a lot of mountaineers. And so when I asked people, like, if you could climb one mountain in the whole world, what mountain would you climb? And the general consensus was a mountain named Ama de Blanc. I say that very slow, Ama de Blanc. It is the Paramount Pictures logo. So my friends are like, anytime you watch a movie, you're going to be like, oh, I climbed that mountain. And, you know, the stars circle around it. I'm like, okay, cool. So I was training for Ama. COVID happens, right? Oh. So I'm not training for anything. I'm training to be a really good stay-at-home mom that does homeschooling for 7 children because all the schools shut down. And my sweet son, who's actually with me today, was struggling with his math homework. And so I was giving him that parent pep talk, like, we do hard things, like, you've got this, like, come on the other side of this, we have something to celebrate. And he looks at me and he goes, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest?
Oh.
Ooh. So it's Ama de Blanc, honey, not I'm a dumb blonde. But thank you, because awesome that we're telling everybody in the world that. So we looked at Everest, and he went to bed, and I still looked at Everest. And I thought, why not? If Everest is the hardest mountain in the whole world to him, I'm his mom. I'm going to show him that whatever our Everest is, we can accomplish it. And then things unfolded from there.
I love that, though, because we say that too. And we both have sons. Our youngest is 8 as well. And we always say, we do hard things, whether like we're working out here, we do an extra run there. And I love that you frame that up with your kids, because a lot of people are listening to this, probably they do have kids. They're like, man, is it too late for me to do it? And I love that you said, let's do it now before it does become too late. And how many things have we put off? We wish we had done sooner. And you just tackled it. And the other thing too, I don't want people to miss this, your kids look at you very differently. And when you shared that, I thought about, man, our kids look at us as these superheroes sometimes, but they may say that's super hard. And we're like, well, that's not really the hardest thing. But if I do that, that's who we're really taking care of, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that you chose Everest.
Well, and the fact that when we say Everest, like we even have it in our household now, what's your Everest? Because then it's a language, it's a commonality that I know whatever my kid's going through, that's their Everest. It might not appear like an Everest to me, but if they're classifying it as an Everest, I know how to handle supporting them in whatever their Everest is. And it can be making a soccer team. It could be my girlfriend and I broke up. It could be I have a math test. That's their Everest. That's the thing that we all need to support and realize, like, that's big in your life.
I love that. So expand on that, because I think people listening, I love that you use these, because words matter.
Words matter.
And when we share this and somebody goes, yeah, what's your Everest? Even if somebody was listening today to start looking at their life, we're about to round out the year. What is your Everest you want to do in 2024? You know, people to think that way. How do you use that with your kids, though? Because I want to get kind of practical. People that are probably listening, their parents, like, how do you use that with your kids to figure out what their Everest is and then help them go, I'm going to go do that?
Yeah. Well, we get one Everest.
Ooh.
Right? We don't get multiple Everests. So then that helps us prioritize and line up our life to mimic what we say. And so for me, when I look at my life, I'm 3 things. I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, and I'm an athlete. So when I look at my calendar, it needs to line up with those 3 things as well. When I look at what I'm going to decide to do, it needs to line up with that, which means things look different for me than they might look for you. Everybody knew when I was training for Everest, if they wanted to spend time with Jenn, they were going on a hike. Yep. They were going to go train with me at the gym, or they were going to watch a soccer game with me when my son was playing soccer, and I'd have a 12-inch step on the sideline with a backpack full of water bottles so that I could train while I was watching him play instead of just sit on the sideline and cheer. Because I have limited time, just like everybody else that's listening. So you need to look at your life, declare who you are, what your goal is, and then build around that.
I love that. I had a coach share this probably 5, maybe 6 years ago now, talking about the term integration. Yes. And so that's what made me think of it when you shared that. And I'll do the same thing at kids soccer. I'm walking. We can do lunges. We can do squats. We see when people sit and they're like, I have no time. I have no time. But you do. And I love how you just shared that one example that people can take and go, okay, I'm there. I'm watching this. I'm participating. But I also can do something else, right? We're able to do those and integrate. Are there other areas you found where you've been able to integrate? Because when you're training at that level, like you said, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're an athlete, you've got all these responsibilities. Are there other areas you've been able to integrate to stay committed to those goals?
Yeah, it's the little things. I think we're always looking for this big magic pill.
Right.
It's not a magic pill. It's little stuff that compounds. And so Zoom meetings, I'll use one of those AI technologies to take the notes. So I can sometimes be on an elevated treadmill.
Yes.
And so I'm involved in the conversation, but I don't have to write everything down.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll do that. I know gratitude's huge. So I do trigger meditations throughout the whole day. So for me, a trigger is every single time I touch a doorknob, that's a trigger to take 3 deep breaths and just slow down whatever I'm doing at that moment. I have a red light by my house. Every single time I hit that red light, that's my gratitude light. Everybody knows in my car, we go through our gratitude during this red light.
Yeah.
It used to drive me nuts that I hit the red light. Now I'm like, sometimes we'll hit the green one. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to slow down and do my gratitude, but I hit a green today. So maybe next time. So it's just finding those little moments throughout our day that allows us to slow down and live with intent.
I love that. And you shared something. I want to make sure that I honor what you shared. I sent this to a friend this morning too. I said, hey, I'm super excited. We got Jenn coming on the show. And I said, you'll love this because her message and the way you tied this down. You said, the reason why I share this story, which is part of the story you've shared, we're going to talk more about, is I look at my life 5 years ago before the car accident. And my mindset was always, if, then. When my kids get older, then I can do this. And you talked about the book. I want the book to be a permission slip for you to own who you are. And I added the word "and" to my life. I'm a mom and a mountaineer and an entrepreneur. You talked about being an athlete. And I love this because too many people, I think, are the or, right? Like I'm at business doing work and doing all this, or I'm at home. And you figured out how to put those together. And I love that you said that. Give people a permission slip.
Yeah.
Why can't it be and?
Right.
As they go through. So you've got your podcast, Seek Your Summit podcast. You got your book here. I love that you're telling your stories. If you were to go back and tell the Jenn 5-10 years ago some advice about where to start and how to start, what would you tell her?
I'd say big mountains take big teams.
Okay.
I think a lot of times we take on these big goals and then we try to do it all ourselves. And when we do it all ourselves, we run out of energy. All of a sudden, the oxygen's low. Our backpack's too heavy. The summit feels far. And then we want to start compromising and be like, oh, well, maybe I'll do it a little bit less. Or, oh, well, maybe I was just being overly optimistic. No, you weren't. Like you were given that vision for a reason. And if you're running in and you're starting to try to compromise, that doesn't mean compromise. That means stop and say, who can help me on this summit, on this quest, so that I can make it to the top?
And you had to have a team to get to the top.
You do.
I was looking at some of that.
Yes.
Your stuff that you were talking about, even like the hair dryer piece about it. But I loved that. I was like, oh my goodness, all these things you don't think about. You got to have people around you and what you had to go through. So somebody that maybe is thinking, okay, that sounds cool, Jenn. Like I have people reach out all the time. Hey, how do I find a mentor? Hey, how do I find this person to help me? When you started to build out your team and get ready, how did you start that? And what were you looking for in people to get around you to build that team?
First, I was willing to wave my flag wherever I was. Okay. So we love to wave our flag at the summit. That's where you see summit photos, right? It's fun. It's exciting. We made it. But the reality is we need to wave our flag at the bottom, at the curve, at the wrong turn, at all these different things, because that signals to the world, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's where I am. Here's how I can help. And let me give you an example of this. When I took on this pursuit, I wasn't a mountaineer. So I wanted to wait until I was done and then share the journey. But one of my friends convinced me, like, you need to share it from day one. Mm-hmm. Like, we're never going to see these environments. We're never going to get these experiences. The only way is through you. So please start sharing. Yeah. So I did. I said, hey, I'm taking on this pursuit to set this world record. And one of my climbs was in Africa. And I was saving that climb for the end because it was more technical. It was rock climbing. I just figured like I'd get more experience before I did it. But I had a charity reach out to me from Instagram. And they said, hey, listen, we see that you're going to Africa. We actually raised money to provide an ambulance for this community in Kenya. It looks like you have a mountain there. Do you know when you're planning to climb that? Because we'd love to partner with you so that we don't need to send somebody from our organization if you're already going there. I'm like, I'll go tomorrow. Are you kidding me? Like, yes. And so it was interesting. I would have never known of that charity. They would have never known of me. We all of a sudden we were able to collaborate. I was able to go over there, do so many amazing things outside of just the climb. And that's because I shared.
Wow.
And I think we sometimes just need to be vulnerable enough to share.
Yeah.
And we don't have to have it figured out. But then it draws in what we need, and it tells people how we can help them.
I love that. Yeah, and that's one of those life lessons. When you ask for help and you start to put out there, hey, I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing it. Isn't it amazing? It's almost like that white car when you say, hey, look for the white car. Like, man, there are white cars everywhere when you put it out there. And I love that you went through this. And I want people to kind of go in with you on this. And there's a physical side to what you're doing on these challenges. But talk to me about the mental toughness, the mental side, because I got to imagine, I'm looking at some of these things you did, and I'm like, that's scary. Yeah. Let's just be real, right? Like the mental side, because physically you might be able to get through some people can't, but the mental side, I got to imagine, was a lot.
The mental side's a lot. I think God prepared me for that with 7 children. You get lots of mental training at home, how to hold everything in and just allow it to be. But I didn't realize when I took on this pursuit that I have a fear of heights. And I had heard of people having a fear of heights. But when I went to go climb this one section one day, I mean, I turned pale. My legs started shaking. My hands felt like I was in a swimming pool. And all of a sudden I had to climb down. And I looked at my coach. I'm like, what just happened? He's like, well, I think you have a fear of heights. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, I have a problem. I cannot have a fear of heights. He's like, don't worry. We'll do exposure therapy. I'm like, okay. So what I would do is I go on that wall and I'd go one handhold higher and then come back down. And then go one handhold higher and come back down. And we just worked it out of my system. Well, then I got over to Everest. And if anybody has seen photos, they love to put on those news, like those ladders that cross those huge crevasses that have 2,000 foot drops. I'm like, oh. And it's not OSHA approved, okay? Like when you step on that ladder, the other side goes up in the air, or all of a sudden a section's falling down because the sun radiates off the metal, so then it starts melting the snow around it and all these things. And I remember getting up to the ladder saying, okay, like I have to do this. Like it's not an option or I don't get up this mountain. Yeah. And so what is going to help me get across? So I had notes in my pockets from friends. So I would read like, okay, you're brave. You got this from them. I had Vanilla Ice playing on my headphones. Oh, yeah. Right? Anything less than the best is a felony, right? Like, so I'm like trying to get in the mood. And then I realized, okay, the one thing I can do to get to the other side is take a safe step. That's what's in my power. There's 999 things that are not, but the safe step is. And so I repeat it to myself out loud. Safe step, safe step, safe step. And I walked across that ladder. And I'll tell you, on the other side, we had a celebration that was worthy of getting to be the president of the United States. We shook out all of our nerves with the dance party. And that confidence carried me up the rest of the mountain.
Wow. And I've seen pictures of that. And that is nerve-wracking because you're right. These aren't like when you go to a ride somewhere at Disney or somewhere and you're like, this is going to be scary. But someone's already checked that out.
Right.
You know it's going to be safe. You're crawling across. I love what you said too, when you got to the other side, how you celebrated. And I often think about visualizing like where we want to get to throughout that. And did that play any part? Were you visualizing each kind of segment, each new milestone as you were getting there? To kind of see yourself there?
Yeah, you know, that's the beauty of Everest and some of these climbs compared to some of the other ones. They have visually changing things, right? So all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got through the ice fall, or I got through the Lhotse face, or I got to the balcony, or I got to these different areas. When you climb a volcano, for example, you're like, I've been hiking for 2 hours, so I know we've made progress, but I have nothing to visually reference that I've made progress. And so when you're taking on your Everest or your big goal, it is very important to put these milestones in and these little checkpoints and say, hey, we're making progress. Here's what's going on, because that gives you just that momentum to continue.
I love it. What was your favorite moment?
favorite. There's a lot of favorite moments because there's different moods that
Yeah.
they tickle, right? I will say when I was on Mount Tyree, which is the second highest point in Antarctica, and there's a one camp and then you go for a summit push that's anywhere from 18 to 36 hours. So it's a big day ahead of you. I woke up, I looked out into the world. We were like the 15th people on this mountain, right? So it's not heavily climbed. There's not a lot of information. And I was just filled with gratitude. I just remember looking out thinking, man, this world is our playground. We'll look at what time of the world I was born into. If I would have been born when my grandma was born or my mom was born, this wouldn't even have been in the realm of possibility. Like, we are making so much progress as like a human race. And like, I was just so grateful, and I can still tap into that feeling of awe.
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are cool moments too, because you're right. Like you said, you can tap back into it. And I think people miss those moments of whether it was adversity that we overcame, or it's something that was like just we're super joyful. Like we're talking dancing on the other side or crossing the bridge. Like you can go back to that. It's like, okay, I know I can do hard things over here because on the other side of that, man, it's worth it.
Yes.
So let's flip it. That was the best. What was one of the scariest moments or times that you maybe weren't sure you guys were going to actually make it?
Yeah, so K2, right? So K2 is one of the deadliest mountains in the world. Depending on the weather each year, it's in the top 3 always. I was with a team in 2021 where there wasn't enough campsites in one of the camps. So I actually was one of the fitter people on the team. I live at altitude, so that was an advantage. So I went a day ahead of the team, and we were going to meet up later on the mountain. And when we woke up in the morning, we were starting to climb. And every morning you hear avalanches because the sun starts coming out, the snow starts to fall, and it just becomes like, oh, I'm in a bowling alley, right? You become numb to it. And for some reason that morning just had a weird vibe in the field, and we got a phone call on the radio. And when you get a phone call on the radio, you have 15 minutes to get to a safe spot to call back. Otherwise, they'll call you again. So I got the call, then I got another call. I'm like, oh, they must have double hit it. Then I got another call. And then 4 calls within 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, like your mind just starts racing and you cannot get to a safe spot fast enough to understand what's going on. So I handed the radio off to the porters that were with me. They're talking. I'm straining to understand what's going on. I don't speak Pakistani at all. Yeah. They finally hand me the radio and they're like, hey, Jen, there's been an avalanche. Rick's dead. Jordy's injured. And Stefan's stuck on the mountain until it's safe enough to rescue him, because if we send a helicopter now, the blades will vibrate another avalanche. And it's one of those things where you read about, right? And you read about it, but you just don't really think it's actually going to happen to somebody on your team. And especially, this was our most experienced climber. And so I remember just sitting there thinking, like, now what? Like, what do we do? This is insane. And finally, another team came up to us, and the team asked me, like, Jen, do you want to go with us up the mountain? We're going to go. Or do you want to go back down with your team because your team's going to turn around? I remember looking at the individual like, what are you even asking me? Are you kidding me right now? I'm like, no, I'm not joining your team to go up this mountain. The mountain will always be here. I'm going back down to take care of my teammates. So I remember going, we were 2 days from the summit. So we went down. I mean, I had to bury a human. I had to help another human get heli evacuated out. And then we had to start the 60-mile-ish trek out. And I trekked home. I got home early because of the disaster. And my kids came home from camp the next couple days. And I remember my son getting home. He's like, hey, Mom, did you summit? I said, no, I didn't, but I had success. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, honey, who we show up as people is way more important than anything we'll ever achieve. And I'm proud of who I showed up as. And so to me, that's success. And he's like, okay. You know, and you still have that, like, I mean, you're sad, right? There's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of things invested to make that thing happen. And you have to give it all up. And I had to go back, right? K2 was one of the mountains that I had to climb to have this record. So it wasn't, oh, never mind. Yeah. It was, okay, we're going back. And now I know I'm going back into, which is scary. And so I'm 3 weeks from needing to leave. And I'm still trying to find why did I fail? Like, why did this happen to me? What's going on? Da 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 da. And I get a phone call. And the phone call is like, hey, Jen, there's this individual that's been training for K2 that doesn't have the resources to make it happen. Do you think you could help out? Are you coming back this year? I'm like, yeah, I can help out for sure. Like, research, we got this. And so I went back to K2. There's other stories involved in that too, but I went back to K2 on July 22 of 2022. I became the third American female to summit K2.
Unbelievable.
And 30 minutes later, the first Pakistani female stood on top of her country's prized peak.
Wow.
And that was why I failed. That's why I had the experience that first time, so I could come back and make more possible.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was reading that story and I thought, how cool is it sometimes God will intervene.
Yes.
And it's not to lessen the things that happen along the way, but at the same time, it's like there is a purpose to what's happening there and that you got to help her. Yes. And all of that aligns up.
All of it lines up.
We just don't think of that way.
We don't think of it that way. And like, if I looked back on the individual that passed away, he was 68, single, and married to the mountains. At the end of the day, like, if somebody is that person, what an honorable way to maybe go, right? Like, you're doing what you love. You've been doing it for your entire life. You're trying to set a new route, and it didn't work out. But, I mean, there's other ways that would have been less glorifying.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that you got the perspective of that, because a lot of times people look back and, Tony Robbins always says this, like, whatever you give the meaning to that story is what that story is going to mean for you going forward. And as you look back, I would encourage you by listening as you look back on your life, like things that have happened, and you think they happen, as they say, to you, maybe they happen for you. And can you find the blessing or gratitude in it? Okay, now what do I do with it?
Right. I mean, that's your competitive edge, right? It's the fact that you get to write the story, to do the narrative of your life, to give you power to do magic.
And you've got several competitive edges, but I'm curious. I always love to ask this question of people, like, as you're to look at what you've been able to accomplish in all these different areas, from a mom to climbing the mountains to all these other things, recovering from a car crash, what do you think your competitive edge is now?
I have a servant mindset.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm here as a vessel for God to work through and make things possible. And I just trust that he knows he can use me.
Yeah.
And I'm here for it.
I love that. And your book is going to bless people. So I want to jump into it, because I think for people that are listening, I know a lot of my friends, they love to read and they love stories. And we've shared some of those stories, but you've got a lot more. I mean, we only gave a little bit of it. Tell me about the book, and we kind of know why you wrote it and things there, but what can a reader expect, and who's the book really designed for?
Yeah. So what we did is I take the reader on each adventure. So we go to each continent, we go to each mountain, you get brought into a moment on that mountain through the story, and then we highlight a lesson that I've learned that allows you to apply it to your own life and become resilient in your own pursuits, with different questions and different ideas to help you bring it home.
And I love that people can go on the journey, because the stories, I mean, as I was prepping, I just had fun, because when people have done things you haven't done, you're like, how did they do it? Yeah. And then how do I apply that and use the word resiliency? I love that word, because in sports, that's really, I look back now, I'm like, that's everything.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know any great athlete that ever got better without facing adversity. And I don't know any great athlete that won all their games either.
Right.
So they have to learn, how do you deal with when you win, the highs? How do you deal with the lows when you lose? Do you think as an athlete and starting out, that prepared you back to the mental side of what you did? Because I know the mom side was huge, right? You dealing with 7, like the chaos and all that. But do you think the sports side?
Yeah, I think all of life kind of lined up for it for me. So the sports side for sure, right? Because everything's temporary. You have that game, you have an hour and a half. When that hour and a half is done, the game's done. Yeah. So you got to put it all on the field, because you don't get those an hour and a half again. So anything you're going through is not forever, because it's never been forever. Right. And then the other piece of it is I was in finance. I own a finance company, and you just learn the power of compounding. Anything's better than a zero. Right. So it gives you permission to do like little things. Okay, maybe my workout was 3 hours, but I only got an hour. An hour is better than zero. Yeah. You can multiply off of an hour. You can't multiply off of zero.
Oh, I love that. I would love you to expand on this, because right now we're dealing with what in the financial services, mortgage, real estate, all this, probably for most people, if we're honest, it is one of the most chaotic times. And some are winning, but many, truthfully, if you look at the amount of people that are exiting the business, it just tells you the story of, okay, what's happening. What advice would you give to them that you've learned through all of your experience of how do they get through this season that many would say it probably gets a little bit worse before it gets better. We've got some things we've got to get through financially and with what election year, all this stuff coming up, right?
Right. 2024
is going to have its own set of challenges that people got to overcome. What advice would you give them on how to overcome and approach that?
Yeah. So for me, I try to anticipate what kind of challenges that I'm going to run up against and have bandwidth to absorb those, whether it's financial, emotional, mental, right? Like we have these bank accounts that we need to balance and keep in check. And then normally what happens is not the things I anticipate that are going to take me down. But because I have that bank of whatever, that gives me the balance to handle what does show up, because there's always going to be something that shows up. So it's normally not what I expect that's going to take me down, but it's because I prepared for that allows me to take on whatever does come my way. And so if you're listening, like anticipate things that could derail you or throw you off or do things that aren't going to set you up for success. Have something in the emotional or financial or mental bank account to handle that, and know like, hey, it probably won't be that thing, but it's going to be disguised as something else. And now you have the bandwidth to handle it.
I love that. And that's great advice for people, because I know early in my career, I did not do that. And it was like, you just went with whatever came. And it was just almost like, well, whatever today is, we'll just deal with it. Rates go up, rates go down, home sell, all this stuff. As you look at 2024, are there any things that you're anticipating in the financial markets?
I'm anticipating chaos.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I know it's going to be chaotic, then when it shows up chaotic, I'm like, okay, I kind of expected this and now I can ride it out. Or what am I doing this year that this really matters? And I start taking a longer term approach. Okay, in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, or whatever. And that just smooths out any blips in our radar.
Yeah. And you talked about this too. You had a coach and you had people on your team as you climbed all of these mountains. What would you advise people today? Because you have a coach for business too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's the importance there? Because a lot of times I still hear people, they want to debate this thing about, I'm just going to do it on my own. I don't have enough money to get a coach. All these excuses you hear and you're like, no. You got to start where you are. So give us some perspective on that, how a coach has played into what you're doing and maybe why people need a coach going into next year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need people to hold yourself accountable to who you want to show up as, right? It's a slippery slope when we only have ourselves to report to. And it just gives you an idea, like you're not in this alone, right? Like go back to the concept that we started in the beginning. Big mountains take big teams. We're going to be climbing a big mountain next year. So you need a big team to just talk to, right? I mean, you're going to say, oh my gosh, the market's going to tank. I want to pull out of my investments. You have a financial advisor to help you stay the course. You have a mortgage advisor that knows things that can help you look and say, no, you're in a good spot. You know what? When this happens, we'll reevaluate, or this is what's going on. These people are here to help you. Lean on them.
Yeah, I think people miss that. Yeah. And the folks that are in those roles, I can tell, and you said this, your competitive edge about being a servant leader in a way, and just that servant heart and all that. And it's missing today. Yeah. I really feel like, and I'd love for you to talk about this, as I see this so often, as the people just want to go get all the book knowledge and they want us to learn all the products, programs, whatever it might be, financial services, mortgage, real estate, and they forget. They are like, no real heart in the game. And so how do you bring that in? Because you have a lot of responsibilities. I think people, if they hear this, they go, well, I probably don't have 7 kids. I probably am not doing all these things that Jenn's doing. So I can put those excuses aside. How do you show up with that servant heart in the financial side? Because I think, to me, that is the game changer.
Yeah. It's a people business. The little things that we do, the financial products, the mortgage products, the insurance products, those are products. There's a bazillion of them because there's a bazillion different types of people out there that have different needs. And so my job is to just help that person be okay, understand that they are okay, understand that we have things in place for them, and that we see them. They're heard, they're seen, they are understood.
See, I think that's the big one. People talk about that. If you're seen and you're heard and somebody listens to you, I mean, how many times I know this, we look at mortgage stats and real estate. How How many times do they go to someone else because someone else made them feel seen and heard and trusted? Yeah. And so I don't want people to miss that, because it sounds one of those like cliche or soppy or whatever they might say. And it's like, no, think about the last time you actually worked with someone, and did you go back? And it's usually, yes, the product and service mattered in the moment, but it's how they made you feel. Mm-hmm. And did you trust them to come back and say, hey, I've got another problem? Or to your point earlier, people are worried about getting out of the market next year, or what am I going to do with my mortgage? Am I going to buy this, buy that? If you don't have a trusted advisor going through this solo,
yeah, not a thing. I mean, I can even go back to my car wreck. So my car turned into this little teeny tiny tin can. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to need to get a new one. Every airbag went off, blah, 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 blah. The insurance company's like, well, we can't tell you that because we haven't seen the car. I'm like, okay, fine. I go down to the dealership, and the dealership's like, yeah, it's totaled 100%. So we'll help you get a new car. So I bought a new car from them, and I had taken an Uber down to the dealership. So all of a sudden they give me the car keys. I'm like, oh, I have to drive again. I haven't, like, oh my goodness, I'm scared to drive because of what just happened. And my guy that I bought my car from came out into the parking lot, and he's like, what do you need? I'm like, I need courage right now to drive this car. He's like, well, you got it. Because you're either going to feed that, you're going to feed the fear, and one of them's going to get bigger. So what one do you want to get bigger? Oh. And I'm like, courage. So I drove home sweating. Like anytime I got next to a semi, I went like as far over in the lane as possible. I mean, it was the most horrific ride home ever. It was the longest 35 minutes of my life, but I did it. And when I got back, my dealership guy called me, just making sure you got home safe. I'll buy a car from that guy the rest of my life. Right? And it's so important for us to be that for each other. Who cares what the car is?
Yeah. And that's powerful. That's a great example too of people, just that one little phone call. How many minutes did that take?
Right.
And he steps out and does that. So I'm going to shift gears, because we talked about the mental side. I would love kind of close out with the physical side, because I think a lot of people, they've neglected their physical fitness, and they've neglected like being in shape, helping them do all these things they want to do, and they're out of energy and they're always tired and all this stuff. Talk to me about how that's played a role for you and the advice you would give people, because this, I know for my own life, when I've been out of shape, I'm not a great dad, husband, leader, all these things. And then when you get in shape, magically the energy, the enthusiasm, it's there. So I want to know your perspective on this.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a story from K2 that like shares this a little bit. I had just climbed K2, right? Like I'm ecstatic. I go to get my phone to call home. It's the satellite phone. And I have a message on the phone that says, my two boys that are Yosemite National Camp, like park camp, quit. I'm like, oh, that's cute. You're not allowed to quit. Your mom just climbed K2. You could handle Yosemite National Park camp, I promise. And I was violently ill. We found out when I got back into the United States that I contracted anthrax while I was over there. So I lost 30 pounds while I was climbing, blah, 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 blah. And I only came home because those boys needed me to come home. So otherwise I would have taken about a week to get out because I was sick. And I'm like, okay, I'm doubling down. I was so angry when I got that phone call. Like, I'm like, those boys are going to work for the rest of their life and they have no idea. Like all those feelings, right? A 60-mile trek out, when I got to the airport, I was like, I can't even get mad. Like I'm trying to get back to that anger spot that I had earlier because they need to hear it. But I couldn't get mad because I had like walked out all those feelings. And I think we forget that our bodies need this movement to push through things or get stories moving or not get stuck. And so that's why we have so much more energy when we exercise, because we're kind of clearing the pipes, right? And we're keeping movement going, and movement gives us balance and gives us purpose and gives us everything. And so I think you have to physically take care of your body because it allows you to mentally and emotionally take care of yourself.
Oh, that's golden. So people got to rewind that, because that is it. And as you're sharing that, I'm thinking our 3 kids, I know they're in better moods when they've worked out. They've gone to practice, right? And I won't call any of them out because they may listen to this and hear it. But I remember a mentor shared this years ago, and he said, you can act your way into a better way of feeling a lot faster than you can ever feel your way into a better way of acting. Meaning, go just walk. just go do something. Go pick up the phone, go walk around, go read a book, go do something. Because if you wait for the moment to just feel right, it ain't coming.
Nope, sorry.
It's not happening as it comes through.
It might come through, but you're not moving to meet it, so you lost it.
Yeah, and somebody else, I always think my competitive side goes, somebody else has already moved ahead.
Yes.
And I missed an opportunity that I could have served somebody, done something great. So share with me, I love these lessons. What is a lesson you've learned in 2023? Maybe even a belief you had that now you no longer have. Doesn't really serve you and you've moved forward. Just a lesson people could learn from your journey.
Yeah. Have fun. So there's a section of Everest called the Lhotse Face, which is a 3,700 foot treadmill outdoors at an Stairmaster. And most people, that's their least favorite part of Everest to climb because it's just brutal. And we knew that going in. So we decided to sing songs and take turns on who was going to tell the joke or tell the story or do whatever. And I will tell you, my favorite part of Everest was the Lhotse Face because of the stories that we told and the way that we took that on.
Yeah.
And so if you can understand that you have this vision, I want to climb my Everest. If that was planted in your heart, it's going to happen. So when you know that that's going to happen, now your job is to how do I have the most fun making this happen? How do I have the most impact making this thing happen? And that's where the creative play gets to come in. So anybody that's listening, that's taking on something, I'm going to ask you to pause and ask yourself, how do I make this more fun? Because the person who's having fun is a hard person to beat.
Oh, I love that. I just had a conversation this week. It's funny you bring this up. And they're looking to join our team. And about 5 minutes in, he goes, I got to stop you. He's like, you guys have energy. It sounds like you're having fun over there again. I'm like, we are. I go, now don't get me wrong. There are tough things we have to encounter every day. There's difficult conversations. There's all these things that we wish would have worked out. But man, we just choose to have fun here. That's one of our core values. And I love that you share this because I'm seeing that now in people that are exiting, quitting, doing all this, and they're choosing a different kind of hard versus, man, if you had fun while doing hard things, imagine you would go back and do it again.
Yeah.
Do it again. Do it again. And I love that example because I can just imagine you guys doing that, singing, telling jokes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was the dumbest stuff ever. We'd make up words because no one remembers the words to songs when you don't have them playing and, whatever. It's just, that's one of those stories I keep on speed dial. And again, what do you keep on speed dial? When something happens, what's the first story that comes to mind that keeps you in power?
Well, you have dropped some major bombs for people today that I love, and I hope they go, one, buy the book here, guys. Make sure you get this. So we got Break Proof here. I want to make sure that people know where to get that because it's pre-order right now.
Yep.
So we'll put the links in there, but they can buy it Amazon pre-order,
everywhere. Yes.
All the cool stuff. And then your podcast. Let's just put a little snippet in there for them. Who's the podcast for? What can they expect when they tune in for that?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Seek Your Summit. And I interview people and we talk about going from a life of success to a life of significance. So it's really fun.
Oh, yeah. And one of our friends, Randy, I know that's one of those, we hit it off on that. It's okay, how do we move into that? And there's a lot of people that get stuck, and I call it that hamster wheel of just trying to recreate success and never move on. As Maxwell will talk about, significance is way more fun.
Way more fun.
Way more fun.
Definitely.
Thank you. This has been an unbelievable conversation. I knew you would deliver. And the fact that you've done all the things you've done and still, my mom, 7 kids, all the different business things that you do and everything, you're an inspiration to us. It's so cool to see what you've done, but not only that, how you've overcome adversity and your perspective, how you choose to look at it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
It's been awesome. Hope you guys enjoy Nashville. We will be back to Park City, and we'll make sure to let you guys know because one of my favorite places. Our family loves it, and we'll be back out there snowboarding, skiing, and doing all the fun stuff.
I like it.
Awesome.
We're here.
Well, guys, it's been another episode of Finding Your Competitive Edge. So you heard Jenn's. She talked about being a servant leader, servant heart, servant minded. Think about that in your own life today. Where can you serve others? I believe God will put those people around you throughout the day if we're just aware and we take action. That's all that's required. Grab the book, listen to the podcast, tune in. Let us know how this has impacted you in the conversation. And make sure you let us know if anything that you've listened to actually has helped you or served you if you have questions. That's how we reach the audience. We make sure that we're providing value, and we appreciate you guys. Until the next one, do something great.